You're a Stark of Winterfell. You know our words.
When the snows fall and the white winds blow, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives.
Hey everybody, it's Charlie. This is going to be my video all about the origin of House Stark and how they became Kings of Winter. They were not always kings in the North. Kings of Winter is a term of affection given to the Stark kings of the North before Aegon's conquest. So because we're delving really deep into history, I'm doing a new round of the giveaway for that Fire and Blood book, The History of the Targaryen Kings in Westeros. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and leave a comment on the video. That book is actually coming out next week, so I'll do some videos for that too, no worries. Even though right now on the show, Jon Snow is king in the North, technically that makes him the King of Winter, but usually when people talk about the Kings of Winter, they're referring to the ancient Stark kings, the ones that we'll see from the period that they're covering on the Game of Thrones prequel series, that George R. R. Martin keeps referring to as the Long Night, even though HBO apparently doesn't like that title. There was actually a funny moment last week where he was talking about the new books that are coming up. He was doing a bunch of interviews and kept referring to the prequel series as The Long Night. Then later in a blog post said, HBO has asked me to correct this, saying that this is not the title of the prequel series. But the Starks' story as actual rulers in the North starts with the first king of the original First Men to cross into Westeros over the Arm of Dorne. World of Ice and Fire dates that around 12,000 years ago, which would be between 2,000 and 4,000 years before the Long Night. So a long time before the events that we'll see on the prequel series. He was buried in the Great Barrow up in Barrowtown, which is right here north of the Neck, but south of Winterfell. After the death of that first king, as you can guess, his successors ruled the North from the Barrowlands and became known as the Barrow Kings. So this is all happening thousands of years before the Long Night. There's a really cool Easter egg scene for this during Game of Thrones Season 1, Episode 2, when Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon are sitting in this area here. This is the Barrowlands, talking about their time during Robert's rebellion.
This is country. I've half a mind to leave them all behind and keep going.
I've half a mind to go with you.
The story of how the Starks became kings of the North plays out in a similar rebellion fashion, so this scene is just meant to reference that. The actual founding of House Stark as an entity began with Bran the Builder. Most people think that he's called Bran the Builder because he's credited with building the wall after the Long Night ended, but he's also called the quote-unquote Builder because he's credited with founding House Stark in the construction of the original Winterfell castle structure. The actual architecture of Winterfell has changed quite a bit in the last 10,000 years. All this history is really important because the prequel series will feature House Stark and cover some of this period. So even if he's a young man on the TV show, we could see Bran the Builder in the flesh. But the way that George R. R. Martin, the books, and HBO talk about history from that period is that it's very unreliable, so you can't really trust all the facts about how and when in the timeline things happened. So a relatively short while after the founding of House Stark and the construction of the wall, House Stark rebelled against the Barrow Kings and won the allegiances of the other northern houses in a conflict called the Thousand-Year War. Later, the Maesters discovered that it only lasted for about 200 years, but that's still a very long period of time. Here's part of a featurette that they released that covers that's narrated by the cast members. It's really cool. It details their war of conquest and how they got the Barrow Kings to bend the knee. See what that sounds like, a lot like Aegon's conquest, which happened many, many thousands of years later.
The North is the oldest and largest of the Seven Kingdoms, but House Stark has not always held it. When Bran the Builder raised Winterfell and founded our line, we were vassals to the Barrow Kings, who claimed descent from the first king and thus dominion over all the First Men. But after the Long Night, it was our house who built the wall and set the Night's Watch to guard the realms of men, whilst our king sat in his barrow. My ancestors eventually revolted, waging what singers call the 1,000 Years' War, to free our lands. Other families joined us, recognizing that the North is a cold and hard land and needed a king who served its people before himself. Finally, the last Barrow King bent the knee, and House Stark became the Kings of Winter. Yet we were kings in name only, for by then the North had fractured into petty kingdoms, and my ancestors would struggle to unite it again for thousands of years. Roderick Stark wrestled an Ironborn Lord for Bear Island and granted it to House Mormont when he won. A younger son of our family, Carlon Stark, won his own keep after he put down a rebellion and founded House Karstark, one of the most powerful in the north. When the Mandalese were exiled from the Reach, my ancestors shielded them and gave them a home at the mouth of the White Knife, in return for holding the river against pirates and invaders. Now they're one of the wealthiest houses in the north. I'm not so naive to pretend that the entire north welcomed Stark rule. The last Warg King was slain at Sea Dragon Point along with all his sons and beasts. The last Marsh King died at the hands of King Rickard Stark, and House Reed has held the swamps of the Neck ever since. Houses Greenwood, Towers, Amber, Frost. None survive today as more than names in dusty old books. But my ancestors never wanted to destroy their foes' root and stem. The Umbers of Last Hearth and the Glovers of Deepwood Motte bent the knee and became loyal vassals of House Stark. The Red Kings of House Bolton wore cloaks made from the skins of Stark princes they'd flayed, and one of the Boltons was even known as the Red Arm because he liked to plunge an arm into the bellies of captive Starks and pull out their entrails with his bare hand. The North deserved to be wiped clean of them. Yet my ancestors spared them after their defeat because they believed the North couldn't afford to fight itself any longer. Time soon proved them right. When the Andals swept into Westeros, they obliterated all the kingdoms of the First Men except the North. Each of the southern kingdoms fought the invaders on its own, but the North fought as one. When the Andals tried to sail up the White Knife, the Mandalese fell on their ships. When the Andals tried to march an army through the Neck, the Reeds fell on their soldiers. King Theon Stark even sailed his own army to the Andal homeland for vengeance and slew hundreds of Andal warriors. When he returned, he planted their heads on spikes along our coasts, a warning to other would-be conquerors. The warning was heeded for thousands of years, until Aegon the Conqueror.
I always love talking about Game of Thrones history because there's enough material just in that story of the origin of House Stark and how they became kings to do 5 separate spin-off shows just about their house. It's a good reminder of how complicated the relationships were between the great houses during the Long Night. So most of the time when people mention the Long Night, it's only to talk about Azor Ahai, the White Walkers, the War for the Dawn, how the war ended, but there was a whole lot of other stuff going on outside of that. Let me know in the comments if you think that we'll actually see the founding of House Stark on the prequel series along with the founding of House Lannister, because the way that HBO and the other people associated with the producers have talked about it implies that we will. Getting to the season 8 of it all, too, there's a big question about what's going to become of the Stark name in House Stark now that Jon has truly been found out as Aegon Targaryen, if he survives to rule the kingdom with Daenerys and the other surviving great houses. Right now, the only surviving Starks that can pass their name on are Sansa, Arya, and Bran. Bran is a turnip, and if you go by traditional rules of succession and how people pass their name down through generations, only Bran, the male heir, would do that. So the only way for the Stark name to survive is if they bend the rules a little bit. Sansa marries another eligible bachelor that can help her co-rule the North while Jon is busy ruling the kingdom, and whatever male heirs that she has take the Stark name and keep it alive. Arya has never made any indication that she intends to settle down. That's not me. And there aren't that many eligible bachelors amongst the main characters that are still alive for Sansa to marry, aside from, say, like Sweet Robin and Gendry. And I don't think that Arya would be very happy with the idea of Sansa marrying Gendry. Next big question, let me know in the comments, what do you think is going to happen to the Stark name after Season 8? Congratulations to the giveaway winner from my last big Game of Thrones video, Jolyn Garrow. Please email me on the About page of my channel so I can get your contact details. Click here for my Game of Thrones Season 8 Episode 1 preview video, and click here to learn all about the early Episode 1 release date. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody stay awesome. I'll see you guys tonight.